Imagine boarding a train on a routine journey, only to vanish without a trace. In 1911, a passenger train in Italy entered a tunnel and was never seen again. No wreckage, no survivors, no explanation, just an empty track where it should have emerged. For over a century, this incident has puzzled historians, railway experts, and curious minds alike. Today, we're diving into the most mysterious locomotive disappearances in history, starting with this chilling case. Why did the train disappear? Was it a mechanical failure, sabotage, or something far stranger? We'll journey into the forgotten tracks of history, uncovering trains that disappeared as if swallowed by the shadows themselves. The vanishing train of 1911 into the Italian tunnel. It was said to be a warm day in 1911 when a small passenger train left Rome on a journey north. The route was familiar, the passengers were relaxed, and nothing about that morning suggested anything unusual. The train was operated by the Zanetti Company, a name later tied forever to whispers of one of the strangest mysteries in railway history. As the story goes, the train carried about 100 passengers. They were bound for a routine trip through the countryside, a journey expected to last only a few hours. The passengers settled into their compartments as the locomotive made its steady climb toward the mountains. The landscape shifted from sunlit villages to shadowed hills, and the sound of wheels clattering on the tracks created a rhythm that lulled some into sleep. Ahead on the route lay a tunnel that cut through solid rock, built years earlier to shorten the line and ease the passage through difficult terrain. The entrance to this tunnel loomed ahead, a dark mouth that swallowed the light. The train slowed slightly, then disappeared into the opening. On the other side, witnesses waited to see it emerge. They claimed it never came out. Reports from that time say that railway staff and nearby residents were the first to notice something was wrong. The train had entered the tunnel, but failed to reappear, leaving silence and an empty track. Workers searched both entrances and found no wreckage, no smoke, and no sound of metal against stone. The passengers, the cars, and the locomotive seemed to have vanished in the dark. News of the disappearance spread quickly. Families of passengers demanded answers, and railway officials struggled to explain what had happened. Some suggested a collapse inside the tunnel, but no rubble or damage was ever found. Others wondered if the train had somehow reversed unnoticed, but that too left no trace. The absence of debris, noise, or survivors deepened the puzzle. As rumors spread, the story began to take on stranger shapes. One account claimed that a handful of passengers survived and later described a heavy mist filling the tunnel as the train entered. They supposedly felt a deep vibration, then confusion, before losing consciousness. According to the tale, when they awoke, they were no longer in Italy at all, but in an unfamiliar place. Details of this account have changed over the years, but it fueled speculation that the train had crossed not just distance, but perhaps time itself. Skeptics have long argued that the entire episode may be little more than a legend, stitched together from fragments of real accidents and exaggerated over the decades. Italian newspapers from 1911 contain no confirmed report of a mass disappearance of a train that year. Historians who searched official railway records have found no entry of a Zanetti train vanishing from the route. Still, the story has persisted, retold across countries, and passed down as a cautionary tale of travel gone wrong. The legend became even more tangled when it was linked to claims from far beyond Italy. Stories appeared of people in Mexico during the 1840s who described strangers dressed in outdated European clothing, confused and frightened, speaking of a vanished train. Though the timeline does not match, believers connected these accounts to the missing Zanetti train as if it had slipped through time and deposited its passengers in another century. The lack of hard evidence has not stopped investigators from returning to the tunnel site. Over the years, enthusiasts and researchers have visited the area, hoping to find physical clues. They have searched for sealed passageways, forgotten sidings, or collapsed chambers that might explain where the train went. Yet no one has ever discovered anything that could prove or disprove the story once and for all. The tale of the 1911 vanishing train now lives mostly in folklore, a blend of mystery and myth. It has been published in books about the paranormal and repeated in collections of railway legends. Each retelling adds new layers, from claims of government cover-ups to theories of dimensional rifts. For some, it is a story that warns of the unknown hidden in everyday journeys. For others, it is simply an enduring ghost story of the rails. Even without official proof, the mystery has endured for over a century, its power lying not in documents or evidence, but in the unsettling idea that a train full of people could vanish without leaving a trace. Somewhere in the silence of that Italian tunnel, the legend of the lost train still waits in the dark. The missing Zanetti Express. Travelers often speak of journeys as moments suspended between places, but the story of the so-called Zanetti Express suggests a journey that never found its destination. Rather than being remembered for comfort or speed, this train is recalled through whispered tales of disappearance, where reality blurs with myth. The origin of the story is most often tied to Italy in the early 20th century, though precise dates and schedules remain uncertain. According to popular versions, a luxury passenger train belonging to the Zanetti Company was prepared for a routine trip. The coaches were said to gleam with polished wood and brass, reflecting the elegance of European rail travel at the time. Those who boarded likely expected no more than scenery and conversation as the locomotive pulled out of the station. As the legend unfolds, the train entered a tunnel and was never seen again. This detail became the heart of the tale, repeated in countless retellings. What made it compelling was not only the absence of the train itself, but the lack of wreckage, the silence of railway reports, and the absence of any bodies or debris. For those who believed the story, the impossibility of such a clean disappearance suggested something beyond natural causes. Over time, different accounts began to describe the passengers' last moments. Some versions claimed that survivors spoke of a thick white mist filling the carriages. Others described a sudden change in the air, as though the train had left behind the world it knew. While no verified witnesses have ever been identified, the consistency of these details across retellings added weight to the myth, even without evidence. Writers fascinated by the paranormal helped keep the story alive. It appeared in collections of railway mysteries, each retelling adding new shades of drama. Some linked it to theories of time travel, suggesting that the passengers had slipped into another century. Others hinted at a dimensional shift, imagining a world where the Zanetti Express continued on unseen tracks. Skeptical voices point to the absence of supporting documents. No Italian railway records mention such an event, and no newspapers from the supposed year provide reports of a vanished train. Historians who reviewed the details found inconsistencies in location, company records, and dates, leaving the tale without solid ground. To them, it reads more like a story designed to thrill than a record of fact. Yet the lack of proof has never erased the intrigue. In Mexico, strange reports in the 1840s described bewildered Europeans arriving suddenly and claiming to have been passengers on a train. These accounts predated the supposed Italian disappearance by decades, but later writers linked the two, suggesting the Zanetti Express had crossed time rather than vanished. Though the chronology does not match, this connection has become one of the most enduring threads in the legend. Folklorists examining the tale see it as part of a broader tradition of vanishing transport stories. Across cultures, there are accounts of ships, stagecoaches, and even airplanes that set off on ordinary journeys and failed to return. The Zanetti story fits neatly into this pattern, offering a railway version of humanity's fascination with the unexplained. Some modern researchers approach the legend with curiosity rather than belief. They visit the tunnels often named in the story, searching for traces of collapsed passages or abandoned sidings that might explain how a train could disappear from view. Nothing has been found to confirm such theories, but the very act of searching keeps the mystery alive, ensuring that the Zanetti Express is not forgotten. The tale has also been used as a metaphor, symbolizing the fear of stepping into the unknown. Writers and storytellers describe it as a reminder of how little control passengers truly have once they board. The train becomes a vessel not just of transport, but of fate, its steel wheels carrying lives toward outcomes they cannot see. As a piece of folklore, the story has endured for more than a century, carried forward by its unanswered questions. Without documents or records, it remains outside the reach of history, yet its grip on the imagination is undeniable. The idea of an entire train vanishing without a trace continues to unsettle anyone who hears it. And so the mystery lingers, like an echo on empty tracks, suggesting that somewhere beyond the reach of maps, the Zanetti Express may still be moving. The Newfoundland Phantom Locomotive. On quiet nights in Newfoundland, long after the last real train had stopped running, residents spoke of hearing the whistle of an engine echoing across the hills. Some claimed the sound rolled in with the fog, low and mournful, followed by the clatter of wheels on tracks that no longer existed. Others said they saw a light on the horizon, swinging like a headlamp, before fading back into the dark. The stories often centered on the old Newfoundland Railway, a line that once stretched across the island from Street Johns to Port aux Basques. Built in the late 19th century, the railway carried passengers, mail and freight through forests, marshes and rocky landscapes. It was an ambitious project, and for decades it remained a lifeline for isolated communities. Accidents, however, were part of its history, and it was from this mix of steel and tragedy that the tale of the Phantom Locomotive began to grow. One account came from loggers who worked deep in the woods near Gambo. They described a night when a glowing shape resembling a steam engine approached along the tracks. Instead of passing, the light grew brighter, then dissolved into the air. The men swore they heard the hiss of steam and the groan of metal under strain. Yet when they checked the line, no train had been scheduled and no engine had come through. Hunters in the same region later claimed they watched an entire row of phantom cars follow the glowing engine, each one flickering as if made of smoke before vanishing in the night. Locals tied the phenomenon to past wrecks along the route. In several places, trains had derailed after hitting soft ground or colliding with rockfalls. Lives were lost in those crashes, and the memory of them lingered. Some believed the phantom train was the restless return of engines that had met violent ends, replaying their final moments again and again. Railway workers also shared their own strange experiences. A former conductor once told of seeing a bright headlamp while waiting on a siding. He prepared for a scheduled train to pass, but nothing ever appeared. When he stepped onto the tracks, the light vanished in an instant, leaving him with only the echo of a whistle fading into silence. He insisted the sound was unlike any trick of wind or animal, and spoke of it with quiet certainty. Those unconvinced suggested explanations rooted in nature. The marshlands of Newfoundland can produce glowing lights through the ignition of gases, and sound often carries in unusual ways across the island's valleys. A far-off engine could seem closer than it really was, giving the impression of a ghost train. For some, these answers were enough. For others, they failed to account for the consistency of the reports. Geologists even noted that certain rock formations in Newfoundland can reflect and distort light in unusual ways, which may account for the glowing shapes reported along the tracks. So well known did the legend become that it appeared in anthologies of Canadian folklore. Writers described it as an example of a community turning its railway past into something spectral, a symbol of both pride and loss. The Phantom Locomotive reflected a longing for an era when trains connected the island, even as it hinted at the dangers that came with progress. When the Newfoundland Railway was shut down in 1988, many thought the stories would fade. Yet sightings continued along the abandoned tracks that had been turned into trails. Hikers spoke of hearing whistles in the night, and some described a rushing wind on a still evening, as if a train had just passed at full speed. Without an operating railway, the reports took on an even more haunting quality. The persistence of the tale raises questions about memory and place. Perhaps the ghost train survives not because of any physical presence, but because it carries the weight of a vanished way of life. The island once revolved around the rhythm of locomotives, and their absence left behind both silence and stories. Still, the accounts of lights and whistles remain difficult to explain away. Too many have sworn to what they saw or heard, describing the experience in detail that feels hard to dismiss. Whether born from imagination, memory, or something less understood, the phantom locomotive continues to mark Newfoundland's nights. Those who listen closely say the whistle still cuts across the dark, a lonely reminder that some journeys may never be finished. The Silver Pylon ghost train of Stockholm. The platforms of the Stockholm Metro often feel routine and predictable, but whispers of a spectral train called Silver Pylon, or the Silver Arrow, disturb that sense of order. Unlike the green and blue cars that most commuters expect, this train is said to glide in with a metallic sheen, unpainted and ghostly under the fluorescent lights. Those who claim to have seen it describe a sense of unease, as if time slows when the silver cars appear. At the heart of the unsettling legend stands an actual train. In the 1960s, Stockholm experimented with aluminum-bodied subway cars, leaving them unpainted to save money and test new designs. The unusual look was striking, so different from the familiar colours of the fleet. Because only a single set of these cars was ever built, sightings of it became rare, and over time, the scarcity made it stand out even more in memory and imagination. As the story grew, details became darker. Commuters whispered that Silver Pylon was not a normal train, but a phantom that carried passengers to destinations they would never return from. Some claimed that stepping aboard meant vanishing into forgotten tunnels, waking hours or days later with no memory of where the time had gone. Others spoke of figures sitting in silence, pale and motionless, as though the train collected not travellers but souls. Stories sometimes mentioned that riders who encountered the train felt drained of energy afterward, describing a strange heaviness that clung to them for days. One of the most common threads in the tale involves the abandoned Kimling station. Built during the 1970s but never opened to the public, it became the perfect stage for the legend. Its empty platforms and dim passages created an image of a place where only the dead could disembark. Rumours insisted that Silver Pylon sometimes stopped there, the doors opening onto shadows and silence. The phrase, "only the dead get off at Kimlinga," became linked to the ghost train, strengthening its chilling reputation. Eyewitness accounts add another layer of intrigue. Some riders claim to have glimpsed the silver cars racing past, not stopping, but moving with unnatural speed. A few insist they boarded the train, finding themselves surrounded by dim lighting and eerie emptiness before realizing the journey felt endless. These testimonies, often shared in hushed tones, blurred the line between memory and imagination, keeping the myth alive among locals. The media helped spread the story. During the 1980s, Swedish newspapers and magazines mentioned Silver Pylon, often mixing fact with rumour. Television segments sometimes referenced the train when discussing urban legends, framing it as an example of how fear takes root in ordinary places. Each mention gave the myth more weight, embedding it deeper in the cultural landscape of Stockholm. One well-known rumour claimed that a journalist who tried to track down Silver Pylon vanished for several hours, later insisting he had no memory of where he had been. Urban explorers and paranormal enthusiasts later brought new attention to the legend. Some wandered into closed sections of the metro searching for clues, while others claimed to capture faint metallic echoes on recordings made near empty tunnels. These efforts rarely produced solid evidence, yet the absence of proof only deepened the mystery. What people truly feared was not what could be proven, but what remained unexplainable. Even the authorities could not fully silence the tale. Transit officials explained that Silver Pylon was a real, experimental train that eventually fell out of service, yet commuters continued to report ghostly sightings. The rational answer never erased the discomfort many felt when they saw or imagined a glimpse of the silver cars. For every official statement, stories still circulated that the train ran on its own schedule, separate from the living. The legend has endured across decades, shifting from whispers on platforms to discussions online. Today, some see Silver Pylon as a cautionary tale about isolation in modern cities, while others treat it as nothing more than a good ghost story. Whatever the interpretation, the idea of a spectral train gliding through Stockholm's tunnels continues to stir unease in anyone who imagines being alone in an empty station when it arrives. What remains most haunting is the possibility that, beneath the city, past the last passenger and final timetable, something metallic and silent might still be moving where no one expects it. The Lincoln Funeral Train Apparition. The funeral train of Abraham Lincoln carries with it a weight of history and an air of haunting. In 1865, the real train carried the assassinated president's body from Washington, D.C. to Springfield, Illinois, passing through cities and towns where crowds gathered in mourning. The journey was long, covering more than 600 miles, and it became one of the most solemn processions in American memory. Over time, though, a different kind of story began to surface. Accounts of the train appearing again, long after it had completed its journey. Witnesses described a strange sight on quiet nights along the old rail lines once travelled by the funeral procession. Some claimed that at the same hour the original train had passed through. An apparition of a black-draped locomotive returned, its headlamp glowing faintly in the darkness. There were no whistles or mechanical clatter, only an uncanny silence broken by a low, mournful hum that seemed to hang in the air. Among the many sites linked to the ghost train, Albany, New York, is one of the most prominent. Locals said that on late April nights, a spectral engine and cars rolled through the area, accompanied by the echo of a funeral band playing dirges. Onlookers insisted that the phantom train glided with a strange stillness, its wheels moving without sound, the entire procession cloaked in a sorrowful aura that chilled anyone who saw it. Some versions of the story said telegraph wires near the tracks would vibrate violently when the phantom train passed, as if carrying an unseen surge of energy. In other reports, clocks and watches were said to stop as the train passed. People told of a cold wind rising suddenly from the tracks, as though the very air paused in reverence to the figure it carried. Some accounts went further, suggesting that ghostly soldiers could be seen standing guard, rifles in hand, their faces solemn and unyielding as the coffin lay within the central car. Others swore they saw Lincoln himself, illuminated in a dim glow inside the car, his face calm yet sorrowful as the train slid past. It was not a story bound to a single spot. Stories appeared in newspapers and oral traditions across the Midwest and Northeast, where townspeople kept alive the memory of Lincoln's final journey. While details differed, the central image remained strikingly similar: a phantom funeral train appearing on the anniversary of the president's death, or on the date his body passed through a given town. Critics argued that these tales were nothing more than products of mourning and fancy. The assassination had shaken the nation, and the sight of the funeral train was etched deeply into the minds of those who had witnessed it in person. The idea that such a moment might repeat in ghostly form seemed almost natural in a time when spiritualism was popular and seances were a common attempt to contact the dead. Despite rational explanations, the story refused to fade. Railroad workers in particular reported strange experiences, claiming to have seen odd lights flickering along the rails or hearing music where no band could be found. Some insisted that the ghostly procession disrupted real trains, forcing engineers to slow their engines out of fear of collision with something that should not exist. A few engineers went so far as to claim their locomotives lost power momentarily, the engines faltering until the apparition was gone. Historians have noted that the legend took hold during a period when America was grappling with collective trauma. Lincoln's death was more than the loss of a leader. It symbolized the fractures of a country just emerging from civil war. The ghost train became a kind of spectral reminder, keeping grief alive in the national imagination. Modern enthusiasts still trace the supposed path of the apparition, visiting sites where sightings were once common. Though the rail lines have changed and many routes have fallen silent, the idea of a train of mourning still resonates. Travelers speak of feeling a sudden chill while walking near old tracks, or of hearing faint strains of music when the night is otherwise quiet. The thought that a locomotive draped in black might still glide unseen across forgotten rails invites unease, leaving many to wonder if the shadow of Lincoln's funeral train will forever echo through America's haunted landscape. The phantom train of Mako Station, North Carolina. Near the site of Mako Station in North Carolina, people once reported a mysterious light moving along the rails at night, swinging gently, as if carried by hands they could not see. The glow was said to cut through the darkness with an eerie rhythm, bright enough to be seen from a distance, but never revealing its source. Many described it as the unmistakable motion of a railroad lantern swinging steadily in the blackness before vanishing without a trace. Behind the strange light lies the tragic story of Joe Baldwin's death. He was a flagman on the Wilmington and Manchester Railroad in the late 19th century, and in 1867 he lost his life in a tragic accident near Mako. According to accounts, Baldwin was in the caboose of a train when it became separated from the cars ahead. Spotting another train fast approaching, he rushed to the back platform with his lantern, signalling desperately to warn the oncoming engine. The collision could not be stopped, and Baldwin was killed instantly. From that moment forward, the ghostly light began to appear along the same stretch of track. Witnesses claimed that Baldwin's spirit still roamed the rails, swinging his lantern as if forever warning of danger. The tale spread quickly, and the glowing orb became known as the Mako Light, one of the South's most enduring railroad hauntings. Locals insisted that the lantern was Baldwin's eternal signal, a restless effort to prevent another disaster. Reports of the Mako Light were not confined to isolated rumours. For decades, people from surrounding towns travelled to the station, hoping to glimpse the strange glow for themselves. Some swore they saw it hovering close to the ground, while others described it racing along the track as though carried by a phantom train. Accounts often mentioned that the light would approach with growing intensity, then abruptly fade, leaving behind only silence and darkness. What made the story more compelling was that sightings came from all walks of life. Railroad workers, farmers, travellers, and even skeptics reported the same phenomenon. Engineers driving late-night trains through the area sometimes claimed to see the lantern swinging ahead, prompting them to slow down in case of danger. The consistency of these testimonies kept the legend alive and resistant to dismissal. The Mako Light became so well known that it was even mentioned in newspapers and official records. Articles noted the strangeness of the reports and the persistence of the sightings, which spanned generations. By the mid-20th century, the light was considered a part of local heritage, attracting curious visitors and paranormal researchers who hoped to capture it on film or explain its origins scientifically. Several theories emerged to explain the glow. Some suggested that it was nothing more than swamp gas reflecting under certain conditions, while others thought it might have been the refracted headlights of distant trains. Yet these explanations often fell short, as the light was described long before automobiles were common in the area, and its swaying motion seemed too precise to be mistaken for natural phenomena. Paranormal investigators visited the site multiple times, attempting to record the light under controlled conditions. While some captured unexplained flashes, others left with no evidence at all, deepening the sense of mystery. The inability to consistently prove or disprove the phenomenon only added to its reputation, making the Mako Light one of the most puzzling railroad apparitions in American folklore. With the abandonment of the Mako line in the 1970s and the later removal of its tracks, the legend began to lose its hold. Without the physical rails, the ghostly lantern was seen less frequently, leading many to believe the spirit of Joe Baldwin had finally been laid to rest. Still, old-timers in the region sometimes whisper that the light has not disappeared completely, but instead waits in the darkness, ready to reveal itself to anyone walking the path where the trains once ran. To this day, the thought of a lone lantern swaying in the night keeps the legend of Mako Station alive, leaving open the unsettling possibility that Joe Baldwin's signal has never truly gone out. The Street Lewis Ghost Train of Saskatchewan. The quiet countryside, near the village of St. Louis, Saskatchewan, has long been the backdrop for a mystery that refuses to fade. Along an abandoned stretch of railway, people have reported seeing a brilliant light that moves as if an unseen train is racing across the prairie. The glow often shifts in intensity, at times a steady beam, and at other times a flickering lantern-like shine, leaving those who witness it unsettled and curious about its source. The phenomenon has been witnessed for decades, with stories passed down among families who lived near the tracks. Older residents remember their parents and grandparents speaking of the strange illumination, describing how it would appear without warning on quiet nights. Sometimes the light was said to approach rapidly, forcing onlookers to step aside in fear, while in other accounts it hovered in the distance before slowly fading into darkness. One explanation often repeated ties the mystery to a railroad accident. Local lore tells of a conductor or brakeman who was struck and killed by a train while carrying his lantern along the tracks. The St. Louis light, many believe, is the lingering signal of that worker, forever searching for the train that took his life. This tragic image became a central part of the legend, giving the apparition a human presence rather than just an unexplained glow. Witness testimonies vary in detail but remain consistent in tone. Groups of travellers driving to the old line have described pulling their cars to the side of the road, watching in awe as a glowing sphere seemed to follow the path where rails once lay. Some insisted the light split into two, one bright and white, the other dimmer and red, resembling the headlamp and caboose lantern of a passing train. Others claimed the light pulsed as though it were moving closer, only to vanish when approached. The reputation of the St. Louis ghost train became so widespread that it drew the attention of television crews and researchers. In 2001, the Canadian show Unsolved Mysteries featured the phenomenon, presenting it as one of the country's most enduring supernatural stories. The coverage only added to the fascination, encouraging more visitors to travel to the site in hopes of seeing the light for themselves. Scientific attempts to explain the mystery have taken place over the years. In 2001, 2 students from a nearby high school conducted an award-winning science project on the St. Louis light. They concluded that the glow could be caused by diffraction from distant vehicle headlights bending across the prairie landscape. Their findings were widely reported, and skeptics pointed to them as the most likely explanation. Rational theories failed to sway believers, who claimed the St. Louis light acted unlike any headlight they had ever seen. Many locals noted that sightings had been reported long before the presence of modern highways or heavy car traffic in the area. Some argued that the distinct swinging motion of the glow resembled a lantern carried by hand, not the steady beam of headlights. The persistence of the story showed that science alone could not erase decades of cultural memory. Some suggested that distant headlights from the nearby highway could be responsible, but the direction of the glow often appeared against the flow of traffic, weakening that explanation. Visitors who have encountered the light often describe a sense of unease beyond the visual experience. People told of sudden chills sweeping across the fields, the air growing heavy as the glow approached. Others recalled that animals grew restless, with dogs barking and horses stamping their hooves in agitation when the phenomenon appeared. These sensory details reinforced the idea that something unusual was truly at work. Although the original railway was dismantled many years ago, the ghost train legend endures. Cars still gather on quiet nights at the location where the tracks once ran, with groups waiting in silence for the mysterious glow to show itself. For some, it is an eerie thrill. For others, it remains a profound encounter with the unknown. The vision of a phantom light sweeping across the prairie continues to capture imagination, leaving open the question of whether the St. Louis ghost train is a trick of the land or a spirit still wandering the tracks of a vanished railroad. Vanishing Orient Express incident. In the early hours of a crisp autumn morning in 1977, a peculiar event unfolded at the Gare de Lyon in Paris. Train enthusiasts and station staff alike were puzzled as they observed the departure of the famed Orient Express, bound for Istanbul. However, as the train traversed the French countryside, it seemed to vanish without a trace, leaving behind only whispers and questions. Witnesses aboard the train reported an eerie silence enveloping their carriages as they neared the Swiss border. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels against the tracks ceased, and the usual hum of conversation dwindled to a hush. Passengers peered out of their windows, expecting to see the familiar landscapes of Switzerland, but instead they were met with an unsettling void. No stations, no lights, just an endless expanse of darkness. Conductor reports from that night describe inexplicable technical failures. Signals malfunctioned and communication lines went dead, rendering the crew unable to contact control centers. Despite these anomalies, the train continued its journey, seemingly on autopilot, until it reached the Austrian border, where it abruptly reappeared on the radar screens of station authorities. A peculiar detail emerged from the train's journey. Several passengers claimed to have seen fleeting glimpses of figures in vintage attire, reminiscent of the train's earlier years. These apparitions, described as elegantly dressed individuals from the early 20th century, were reportedly seen in the dining car and lounge areas. While some dismissed these accounts as mere illusions, others wondered if the train had momentarily crossed paths with its own storied past. Investigations into the incident yielded no concrete explanations. Railway officials and engineers were baffled by the train's sudden disappearance and reappearance. The event was officially attributed to a series of technical malfunctions, but many remained skeptical, considering the coordinated nature of the occurrences and the testimonies of the passengers and crew. Over the years, the incident became a topic of intrigue among train enthusiasts and paranormal investigators. Some speculated that the train had momentarily slipped through a rift in time, while others believed it had encountered a temporary disruption in the space-time continuum. These theories, though unproven, added to the mystique surrounding the Orient Express and its legendary status. In the decades that followed, the incident was largely forgotten, overshadowed by more pressing concerns and advancements in railway technology. However, in 2018, a breakthrough came when a historian named Arthur Metatal discovered a collection of vintage Orient Express carriages in Poland. These carriages, dating back to the 1920s, had been abandoned and left to decay in a forgotten railway yard. Adding to the intrigue, a local historian uncovered a series of cryptic journal entries from a passenger aboard the Orient Express in the 1920s. These writings detailed experiences of time lapses and disorienting sensations during the journey, suggesting that such anomalies might have occurred long before the 1977 incident. The historian's findings sparked renewed interest in the possibility that the train had been experiencing unexplained phenomena for decades. The discovery reignited interest in the long-forgotten mystery. Rail enthusiasts and historians alike marveled at the find, and restoration efforts began to bring the carriages back to their former glory. The restored carriages now serve as a tangible link to the past, offering a glimpse into the luxurious travel experiences of the early 20th century. Restoration aside, the 1977 incident continues to puzzle and invite inquiry. The event continues to be a subject of speculation and debate among those fascinated by railway lore and the unexplained. Whether it was a mere coincidence, a technical anomaly, or something more extraordinary, the Vanishing Orient Express incident has secured its place in the annals of railway history. Even now, enthusiasts gather at the Gare de Lyon, hoping to catch a glimpse of the legendary train as it departs for Istanbul, wondering if the mysteries of the past will ever be fully unravelled. The South African Uniondale train mystery. The town of Uniondale in South Africa is small, quiet, and surrounded by stretches of farmland and hills that roll toward the horizon. On the surface, it looks like any other rural stop along the routes that once carried trains through the country. Yet hidden beneath that calm landscape is a story that has puzzled locals and visitors for decades. People say that in certain places near Uniondale, the sound of a train echoes through the night, even though no train has passed there for many years. Locals recall the early 20th century when trains were the lifeline of South African towns, linking remote farming communities with larger cities. Uniondale sat along a line that played a vital role in moving goods and passengers between the interior and the coast. When railway service through the area declined and eventually stopped, the tracks were left unused. But after the line fell silent, stories began to spread of strange noises and sightings that made the absence of trains feel far from complete. Travellers driving late at night reported hearing a low rumble that grew louder as if a heavy locomotive were approaching. Some swore they could even feel a vibration through the ground beneath their feet. The oddest detail was that the sound never resolved into the sight of an actual train. Instead, it would fade suddenly, leaving only the stillness of the countryside. Witnesses described the experience as unsettling because the illusion of a train felt so real until it vanished. Farmers living near the abandoned tracks claimed to see faint lights moving along the old line, resembling the glow of a headlamp cutting through the darkness. These lights sometimes appeared in motion, tracing the route of the long-gone railway before disappearing into thin air. What disturbed many was that the lights did not behave like ordinary lanterns or car headlights. They stayed fixed on the path of the forgotten line, as if tied to something no longer there. Older residents pointed to tragic events connected to train travel in the region. Railway accidents were not uncommon during the early years, when safety standards were less strict and mechanical failures were frequent. Records mentioned derailments and collisions along routes in the broader Karoo area, though few details remain tied directly to Uniondale. For some, these historical tragedies explain why echoes of trains still seem to haunt the landscape, as if memory itself had left an imprint. Skeptics have tried to ground the stories in science. One theory suggests that shifting winds across the open plains may carry and distort distant noises, making them sound like engines on tracks. Another idea points to the steel remains of old infrastructure that could amplify vibrations under certain conditions. While these explanations provide some comfort, they do not fully match the precision with which the phantom train appears to follow the vanished line. Drawn by wonder, many travellers try to uncover the mystery on their own. Some camp near the old railway bed or wait by bridges where the sounds are most often reported. Many leave without hearing anything, while others insist they have caught faint rumbles or glimpsed lights moving in the distance. The irregular nature of the phenomenon makes it impossible to predict, which only adds to its reputation. Those who experience it say the wait is worth it because the encounter feels like standing between the present and the past. Folklore around Uniondale has also tied the phantom train to broader stories of restlessness and unfinished journeys. Just as the town is known for tales of the Uniondale hitchhiker on nearby roads, the spectral train has become another symbol of travel that never truly ends. Both legends share the theme of movement without destination, a reminder of lives interrupted or routes cut short. Locals sometimes speak of them together, as if the spirits of road and rail are connected. The train mystery has quietly shaped the identity of Uniondale. Tourists passing through often ask about it, and guides mention the legend alongside the town's history. For residents, the story is part of what makes their home unique, even if many treat it with skepticism. Whether viewed as superstition, memory, or something stranger, it adds a layer of depth to a place that might otherwise be overlooked. Though the old tracks have long since fallen silent, travellers say the land around Uniondale has not forgotten the rhythm of iron wheels, and perhaps it never will. The Poughkeepsie Phantom Train on the Hudson Line. Journeying by the Hudson River, many find beauty in its glistening waters, the hills beyond, and the historic towns that line its banks. Yet for those familiar with Poughkeepsie, the Hudson Line is remembered for more than its scenery. Stories have long circulated of a train that seems to move down the tracks with no engine, no cars, and no schedule. The Phantom is said to sweep through the area at night, leaving witnesses unsettled and unsure of what they had seen. Some accounts describe the sound of wheels clattering against rails, growing louder as if an express train were rushing into view. People waiting at crossings or walking near the station have claimed to hear the noise build to a roar before fading to silence. The strangeness of the moment lies in the fact that no train follows and the tracks remain empty. For many, the invisible passage feels more like a memory replayed in sound than an actual machine. On quiet nights, some bystanders even claimed the air around them shook, as if an unseen force had rushed past. Rail history in the Hudson Valley is filled with milestones that shaped travel and commerce. The Hudson Line itself became a vital corridor, linking New York City to Albany and points beyond. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, heavy rail traffic passed through Poughkeepsie every day. Accidents were not rare, especially in an era when safety measures were still developing. Crashes, derailments, and worker deaths left their mark, and some locals believe the phantom train is tied to these tragedies. The sudden emergence of mysterious lights near the tracks is a detail often remembered by onlookers. The glow is described as pale and hazy, moving as if attached to a headlamp but never resolving into the form of an actual locomotive. Sometimes the lights drift close to the river before vanishing. People who have seen them insist the effect cannot be confused with car headlights or street lamps. The light seems to follow its own path, staying locked to the rhythm of rails no longer in use at that hour. A few residents said the glow sometimes shimmered in colours, faint reds and greens, like the signal lamps once used on older locomotives. Conductors and railway workers have added their own voices to the lore. Retired employees have spoken of late-night runs when unusual sounds echoed along the line. A few reported that their trains were briefly accompanied by ghostly lights running parallel to them before disappearing. While most dismiss such talk as exaggeration, others find it hard to ignore the consistency of the stories across different decades. The doubtful turn to nature itself in search of explanations. One possibility is that sound travels unusually well along the Hudson, bouncing off the water and cliffs to create illusions. Distant trains further up or down the line might seem much closer than they are. The same reasoning has been applied to lights, with reflections across the river misinterpreted as headlamps. Yet these explanations fail to cover every detail, especially the reports of vibrations beneath the ground when no trains were scheduled nearby. The city's own past gives weight to the haunting atmosphere. In 1891, the Poughkeepsie Bridge opened, linking the east and west sides of the Hudson by rail. Though celebrated as an engineering marvel, it also witnessed accidents, including fires and fatal falls. Some residents wonder if the phantom train is connected less to one event and more to the collective memory of rail disasters that haunted the region. The persistence of the legend suggests that history itself might echo in strange ways. Railway archives record several fatal mishaps along the line in the early 1900s, fueling the idea that these echoes of tragedy still linger on the rails. In Poughkeepsie, visitors often inquire about the story, wondering if the phantom train is merely a tourist tale. Locals tend to share what they have heard while admitting that the mystery remains unsolved. Some claim to avoid certain crossings at night because of unsettling experiences. Others look for the ghost train deliberately, hoping for a glimpse or a sound that will make them part of the enduring mystery. Whether rooted in history, nature, or imagination, the phantom train of Poughkeepsie has earned its place in Hudson Valley lore. It continues to blur the line between the past and the present, pulling those who hear it into a moment that feels both real and unreal. The unanswered question is not whether a train passes, but what exactly moves through the night when the tracks themselves appear empty. The disappearing mail train of 1910, New York. Fog can change the shape of the land, making the familiar seem uncertain, and in the spring of 1910, a night of thick mist on New York's rail lines gave rise to one of the strangest tales in railroad history. Trainmen swore a mail train left the station as scheduled, its whistles echoing into the darkness, but before reaching its next stop, it seemed to fade away entirely. What followed was not simply a late arrival, but a mystery that railroad officials struggled to explain. Mail trains in that era were vital to the nation, moving letters and parcels across states with precision. Each one carried not just sacks of correspondence, but clerks who sorted letters as the cars rattled through the countryside. A missed train was more than an inconvenience. It disrupted the flow of communication in a time when speed and dependability were a point of pride for the railroads. That is why the incident of 1910 left such a mark. An entire train vanished without a trace along a well-travelled route. Witnesses along the track remembered hearing the train's approach. They spoke of the steady rhythm of wheels on iron and the distant glow of its headlamp cutting through the fog. Yet when they expected it to emerge at crossings or into station lights, it never arrived. Some swore they waited as the sound grew near, only for it to dissolve into silence, as though the train had been swallowed by the mist. Telegraph operators along the route confirmed they logged no sign of the train, despite being prepared for its arrival. Railway records confirmed that the train had departed on schedule from its originating station. Clerks logged in at the start of the run, and the load of mail was properly accounted for. Nothing in the equipment reports suggested mechanical failure, and no telegraph alerts signaled a breakdown. Yet somewhere between departure and destination, the consist failed to appear, leaving baffled crews at the next stop scanning the tracks for a train that never rolled in. The search was immediate. Crews were sent up and down the line to check for derailments, accidents, or stalled cars. Bridges, tunnels, and sidings were inspected for wreckage or signs of distress. Nothing was found, not a broken rail, not a burned-out lantern, not a scrap of torn mail. The line itself showed no evidence that a train had passed beyond its first stretch of track. Newspapers picked up the story quickly, and readers across the region speculated about what could have happened. Some suggested the train had been stolen, though the logistics of moving an entire consist unnoticed seemed impossible. Others whispered about sabotage or a cover-up, pointing to the lack of official explanation. Among the public, more imaginative theories flourished, describing the train vanishing into a hidden tunnel or slipping into another world through the fog. Insurance records from the period noted the value of the undelivered mail was high enough to spark rumours of theft, though no evidence was ever produced. Railroad officials attempted to settle the matter by reconstructing the run. They sent another mail train over the same stretch at the same time of night, hoping to catch errors in signalling or missteps in communication. The repeat journey went smoothly, arriving on time with no interruptions. This only deepened the puzzle, since the vanished train had travelled the identical route with no storms or accidents reported. Over the years, storytellers embellished the account. Some versions claimed the train reappeared days later in a distant yard, empty of crew and cargo. Others said letters from the lost bags turned up in scattered towns, delivered by unknown hands. None of these tales was confirmed by records, yet the lack of clear evidence allowed the legend to persist. For many, the mystery was more compelling than any mundane explanation. Historians who examined the event later proposed simpler causes. They suggested clerical errors, missed paperwork, or confusion in telegraph communication might have created the illusion of a disappearance. Trains often ran in close succession, and a mix-up between two schedules could easily lead to claims of a missing consist. Still, those who swore they heard the phantom train insisted their senses could not be fooled by mere mistakes. On some nights, when the fog settles over the Hudson tracks, listeners claim they still hear the roll of wheels from a train that never arrives. The vanishing commuter train of Beijing. August 6, 2008 saw early morning commuters at Beijing North Railway Station excitedly awaiting the first train on the brand new line Stu. This line, stretching 108.3 kilometers from Huangtudian to Yangqing, was a significant addition to Beijing's expanding rail network. The train, a sleek NDJ-3 model, marked a new era in suburban transit, promising faster and more efficient travel for the city's residents. As the train departed, passengers settled into their seats, anticipating a smooth journey through the outskirts of Beijing. The route, which passed through the scenic battling section of the Great Wall, was a favourite among travellers for its picturesque views. However, as the train approached the Yangqing district, an unexpected event occurred. The train, which had been operating normally, suddenly disappeared from the radar screens of the control centre. Initial investigations suggested that the train had suffered a technical malfunction, causing it to lose communication with the central monitoring system. However, when the train reappeared on the radar several minutes later, it was found to be several kilometers off its scheduled route. The passengers aboard reported no unusual occurrences during the journey, and the train's crew was unable to explain the deviation. The incident prompted a thorough investigation by the China Railway Beijing Group, the operator of the suburban rail services. Engineers and technicians examined the train's systems for any signs of malfunction, but found none. The control center's equipment was also inspected, and no faults were detected. Despite these efforts, the cause of the train's temporary disappearance remained unexplained. Fueling the mystery, several passengers claimed to have experienced time lapses during the journey. Some reported that what felt like hours had passed in what was, in reality, a matter of minutes. Others described a disorienting sensation, as if the train had momentarily shifted between different dimensions. These accounts, though anecdotal, fueled speculation about the nature of the incident. Several security cameras along the Stu line reportedly captured brief, unexplained visual distortions during the train's disappearance. Footage showed the train appearing blurred and flickering, as if moving through an invisible veil, though the recordings were never officially released to the public. This added a layer of mystery, suggesting that the incident was not only a technical anomaly, but also a visual phenomenon witnessed outside of the passengers' accounts. In the years that followed, the story of the vanishing commuter train became a topic of intrigue among rail enthusiasts and paranormal investigators. Some suggested that the train had momentarily slipped through a rift in time, while others believed it had encountered a temporary disruption in the space-time continuum. These theories, though unproven, added to the mystique surrounding the event. The local community felt the lasting effects of the incident, even in the absence of proof. Residents of the Yangqing district reported an increase in unexplained phenomena following the event. Some claimed to have seen ghostly apparitions near the railway tracks, while others reported hearing strange noises during the night. These occurrences, whether coincidental or not, contributed to the growing legend of the vanishing commuter train. Local folklore quickly merged with the incident, with some residents claiming that the train had become haunted by the spirits of previous rail workers who had died along the Stu route. These stories intensified after multiple commuters reported hearing distant, unexplainable whistles echoing through the hills at night. In an effort to prevent similar incidents, the China Railway Beijing Group implemented several safety measures. Enhanced communication systems were installed to ensure continuous contact between trains and control centers. Additionally, regular drills were conducted to prepare staff for potential emergencies. These precautions aimed to restore public confidence in the suburban rail services and prevent the recurrence of unexplained events. All attempts aside, the mystery of the commuter train that disappeared remains unresolved. The incident continues to be a subject of speculation and debate among those fascinated by railway lore and the unexplained. Whether it was a mere technical anomaly or something more extraordinary, the event has secured its place in the annals of Beijing's railway history. On the Stu line, where trains continue to run, commuters occasionally cast nervous eyes at the tracks, haunted by the thought of the vanishing train's possible return. The Phantom Express of Boston Bridge, North Carolina. The night air over Boston Bridge carries a quiet weight, as if the stones themselves remember the events of August 27, 1891. Locals say that on certain evenings, just when the wind bends through the trees, the echo of a train can be heard before any engine appears. It is a sound that unsettles, hinting at a past tragedy that refuses to remain buried. That morning, passenger train number 9 of the Western North Carolina Railroad left Statesville nearly half an hour behind schedule. Locomotive No. 166 pulled 6 cars through the quiet countryside, carrying workers, families, and travelers across the rolling hills towards Salisbury. Few imagined that the bridge over Third Creek would soon become the site of one of the deadliest accidents in North Carolina's railroad history. The derailment was sudden and devastating, The sleeping car plunged from the 60-foot bridge into the creek below, while other cars teetered dangerously on the rails. 23 lives were lost, and many more were injured. In the immediate chaos, survivors struggled to escape the wreckage, some climbing through mud and broken beams to reach help. Their accounts painted a picture of terror, confusion, and a scene that would haunt the region for decades. Investigators quickly suspected sabotage. Several spikes had been removed from the rails, suggesting deliberate tampering. Despite searches and inquiries, no culprit was ever found. The railroad company emphasized the possibility of criminal intent, but the truth remained elusive, and the community was left to grapple with the unexplainable loss. In the years following the accident, Bostian Bridge became more than a historical site. Visitors and locals began reporting unusual phenomena: lights that appeared along the tracks at night, the sound of wheels rolling on empty rails, and whispers carried on the breeze. Many claimed to see fleeting images of passengers or crew in the shadows, as though the disaster were replaying itself. The ghostly figures most often mentioned include a uniformed man said to wear a gold watch, moving carefully along the tracks. Some believe he is Hugh K. Linster, the train's baggage master, eternally searching for the victims he could not save. Sightings are most common on the anniversary of the wreck, reinforcing the connection between the bridge and the tragic events of 1891. Some visitors have reported hearing the sound of distant footsteps running alongside the bridge, even when no one else is present. Others describe a sudden sense of dizziness or vertigo near the center of the span, as if the bridge itself is responding to unseen forces. A few eyewitnesses claim they have seen lantern lights moving independently along the rails, flickering as if searching for the lost passengers of that fateful night. Even the natural environment seems to hold traces of the incident. Witnesses describe a coldness in the air, sudden mists over the creek, and a faint vibration underfoot moments when the bridge itself feels alive. People have said that standing silently, one can hear the train whistle carried across the trees, followed by the distant groan of rails bending under an invisible weight. Local historians have noted that the bridge's structure still bears subtle scars from the derailment, including bent iron railings and worn timbers, which some believe are energy conduits for the phantom train. Additionally, dogs in the area are often reported to bark or growl at unseen presences along the tracks, adding an unsettling layer to the bridge's haunted reputation. Bostian Bridge has not been immune to modern danger. In 2010, a group of ghost hunters visiting the site nearly suffered a fatal accident when a Norfolk Southern freight train approached unexpectedly. The event served as a stark reminder that the railway remains active and that fascination with the Phantom Express carries real risks. The legend has endured, but the bridge is not a playground. Despite this, the story continues to draw curiosity. Photographers, historians, and thrill-seekers journey to the bridge, hoping to capture evidence of the spectral train. Some record faint sounds, others see shadows in long-exposure photographs, and a few claim brief glimpses of the train's lanterns cutting through the night. These accounts, though anecdotal, have kept the tale alive for more than a century, and sometimes, when the wind bends just right through the trees, a lone whistle drifts across the bridge, hinting that the Phantom Express might still be on its endless journey.